Today we're joined by Brian Lee Crowley, the Managing Director at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, and we are talking about foreign interference in Canada. The government just tabled legislation designed to prevent it, and we just had a report released by the Foreign Interference Inquiry on Friday saying that although our elections were tainted in 2019 and 2021, the result wasn't affected. Brian, do you think that after this report and this new legislation, do you think the government is starting to take this seriously?
Well, I think they've been forced to take it seriously.
Yeah.
You will recall that when the allegations about foreign interference were originally raised, the government first of all said, no, there's nothing to see here, move on. Then they got essentially their arm twisted into creating, you remember, the special rapporteur, David Johnston, on election interference, and that was clearly such a worthless effort to find out more about what had actually happened that it was essentially shouted down, and poor David Johnston, who'd been a great Governor General but was a terrible rapporteur, withdrew, and we got this foreign election interference inquiry, and it was very clear that the government appointed someone who, I don't think it's any secret, comes from a law firm that's very close to the Liberals. A lot of us wondered whether Justice Hogue would be able to speak independently. I think her interim report is pretty fair, and I think it makes it clear that the allegations that foreign agents were busy trying to influence the outcome of the last two federal elections is not a rumor. It's not unsubstantiated. There is, in fact, evidence to back up that claim. And so the government has now created the circumstances in which they can no longer ignore this.
Yeah. Do you think one of the features of that legislation was a foreign agent registry? Is that sort of the key policy here, or is there more that needs to be done?
Well, at my institute, the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, we've been arguing for a foreign agents registry for some years. They've had one in the United States for a quarter of a century. In Australia, where they've wrestled with some of the similar problems to those that Canada is now understanding, has had one for 5 or 6 years, I think. And so Canada is behind the curve on this. I think a foreign agents registry is important, but of course, if the people trying to influence the election, for example, are not in Canada, but are approaching Canadians, say, through social media and so on, that's not going to solve that problem. Yeah. So I think there's a much larger issue of election integrity. There's a much larger issue of mis- and disinformation, which can reach us from people, as I say, who are not in Canada. But this is definitely a step in the right direction.
Yeah, how should Canadians think about this? We have an election possibly in a year and a half, maybe sooner. Is this something that Canadians should be thinking about, the integrity of the election and the value of their own votes when they're casting them?
Sure. Well, if you think about the fact that we have spent 30 or 40 years trying to create a legislative framework, a framework of law that guarantees us that elections are fair in Canada. We have rules about how elections are to be run, and that, you know, there are people representing the different parties who participate in the counting of the votes to make sure that there's no funny business. We have very strict rules around who can spend money and how much they can spend. And all of this is designed in order to guarantee to Canadians that when they participate in an election, that the outcome actually represents the will of the people who voted. Yeah. I mean, if we don't have that, we have nothing. In terms of election integrity. So if we have evidence that people have been trying to influence the outcome of elections, and not just through the things that we already regulate, but for example, through nomination contests. That's one of the things that came out in the inquiry, is that because those things are regarded as internal party matters, they generally fall outside the framework of the law, which is designed to provide us with this guarantee that elections are free and fair. I think we have to start asking ourselves questions about things outside the framework of the law, and whether the way that we allow those things to be carried out represents a threat to the integrity of our elections. I think that there's a good case to be made that that is the case. Yeah. So we have not finished the discussion about how we guarantee free and fair elections in Canada.
Okay, and one more for you. This is a phenomenon that has been occurring in diaspora communities in Canada. That was a big part of the inquiry. We have immigration that's growing. These communities are getting bigger and there's becoming more of them. We even saw a Conservative leadership candidate, Patrick Brown, go into these communities and almost promise things for foreign policy ideas. What do you think has to happen here? Is this just something that Canada has to get used to, or is this something politicians themselves have to refrain from?
Well, so, you know, the diaspora politics issue is that people worry that in many of these communities, people who are relatively recently arrived in Canada perhaps don't share our culture and understandings around the way elections should operate, that are being, in effect, herded by community leaders into halls to support the nomination of candidates and so on. I think this is a fair concern. I would point out that in the United Kingdom, for example, where they have a system very similar to ours, when a nomination contest is announced, that's when they close the membership list. There's none of this stuff about the way that you get a nomination from a political party to show that you can recruit the largest number of candidates. By the time the nomination contest is called, that's not even on the table anymore. It's the decision about who a candidate will be belongs to the long-term members of the political party who've got some commitment and skin in the game. I'm not saying that that's the best solution either. But I think it's very clear that the way that we allow political nominations to be carried out invites the possibility of improper interference in the process. Right. And so I'm not necessarily saying that governments should legislate about this, because I believe that political parties need to have their own character and their own rules, and they need to operate in the way that they think is fair, and the electorate should make a judgment about whether those things are true. But I think part of guaranteeing that Canadians can have faith in our electoral system is for the parties to stand up and say, we are prepared to guarantee to Canadians that the way that we run nomination contests is both true to the multicultural character of Canada and also true to the ideal of a free and fair election in which people can have confidence that the outcome reflects the will of the electorate. We're not there yet.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Brian. That's all we have time for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.